And what is up, everyone? I'm Joe DeHoyos. I'm the host of Beyond the Woodline, and today I have with me a very special guest. He's an author, podcast host. He's been involved with the Bigfoot research for over 40 years. He's a two-time witness. He's my good friend. I've known him for several years, and he's, of course, is a mentor of mine. And that is Mr. William Jevning. What's up, Mr. William?
Oh, busy as always, Joe. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing good, man. I was telling you, man, I appreciate you coming on, man. I had a guest cancel at the last minute, so I need to
Oh,
find a
I
guest.
know how that is. Believe me.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So you have your own podcast. A lot of people know that, which is Creek Devil.
Right,
But you
right.
also have a new midweek one you were talking about, and which one is that one?
Well, we call it Bigfoot in history. It's a part of Creek Devil. It's just a midweek show.
Okay, cool, man. And how many books have you written?
Uh, 8 so far and 2 on the drawing boards right now.
Yeah, good, good. And where can people find those books?
You can go to Amazon.com and just type my name in, and they'll come up.
Okay, good. Cool. Yeah. Um, just real quick, man. What got you into the whole Bigfoot field?
Oh boy, it
Yeah.
wasn't my choice. Let me tell you. Um, you know, just going back when I was 14. Um, and I don't know. I don't want to go too deep into it, but
Right.
unless you want me to. But we just, a friend of mine and I found footprints on the way to another friend's house, and we didn't know what they were. So, we got spooked, ran to his house, and his dad came back and looked at them, took pictures, and told us what he thought they were. So, and 2 years later, I actually ran into two of the creatures, within 20 feet. So, um, it raised more questions in my mind than there were sufficient answers for. So I've been doing it now for this month, 49 years.
49 years. Wow, man.
49.
Yeah. And when's the last time you actually went out and did some research?
What's that? The
When was the last time you actually went out and did some research?
September.
September, yeah.
September.
Did I find anything good or anything good happen on that trip?
We did. I took my team out, my personal team,
Mhm.
and we went up to Central Oregon. And Tom, my co-host, it was an area that he's been looking at, him and another guy that we work with, and a lot of activity up there. We found tracks, juvenile tracks,
Oh, nice.
and the markings, of course, where they tear the trees up. And it's really interesting about that particular one because usually, I found the trees that are twisted and snapped over. That's kind of the usual fare, but these were, and they were. I think it was maybe it's the type of tree too makes a difference. I don't know. In Northern California here, usually it's the pines that we find twisted. Farther north in Washington, Oregon, you find them the Doug firs that are snapped over. These were red cedar, and it was explosive, almost
Mhm.
like there was a lot of anger involved in it. It was something I've never seen before.
Hmm. That's pretty cool. Did you guys go tent camping or what y'all do?
Oh no. We- it was these are very aggressive group, and
Oh, okay.
there's about 15 of them, and we went up there, and they actually were trying to draw us into a trap around
Yeah.
2 a.m. one the first night up there, and we just made very hasty decision to get out of there because they kept drawing us away, and we could hear three on one side and two on the other side moving and making noises, and it just seemed like the best thing to do was to get out of there quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that always kind of gets on my nerves a little bit when people say that these things aren't aggressive, or but it's like you just never ran into a one with a bad attitude, I guess.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And really depends on what they're doing, I
Right.
guess to give people that impression. But yeah, I've never talked to anybody that's had a good encounter with one.
Right. And Walter is a good example. I go out with him all the time, and he
Yeah.
is so good in any other part of the woods until we get to his area. And over there, he gets pretty shaken up. But man,
Did
he's
you
a good
guys
sport.
did he ever figure out, did you guys ever find out, you sent me that picture that had the wild hog with the head gone.
Yeah, we
You guys
went
ever
back.
figure out?
But
What
we
did
went back
that?
and that hog was gone.
Oh, it was gone.
It was gone. It wasn't
Oh,
even there. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. It was gone. And usually, we've come across animals in the woods, and we can come back 2 weeks later, and you can at least still see some bones or
Something, sure.
yeah, skin, something. The whole hog was gone. Yeah,
Wow. I guess whatever
Dr.
took the
William.
head off decided to come back and take its dinner away.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, they come and get the rest of it. This is Dr. William Lester. He's a good dude, man. He's a doctor in anthropology. He's a good guy. Yeah, so every time we go back to that area, man, it is a creepy area for sure. And even when the sun goes down, man, it starts to get really. Uh, you just get that weird vibe, you know. And
Right,
it's like
right.
a scary place to go to. But we've gone there in the daytime and gotten a very weird vibe out there, and it seems difficult for humans to accept that cryptids generally don't want anything to do with humans. Yeah. But
Yeah, I think that's right. I think especially this subject. Um, I had someone ask me recently why, people don't get pictures and all these different things, and you have to understand that when you're standing in front of something like this, it's an oh crap moment. It's not, you know, I can speak from my own perspective. I mean, I was 16. Of course, we didn't have cell phones back in the
right.
Stone Age, so but the last thing I would have thought would to pull something out of my pocket. I mean, I
Right.
was barely able to focus on what was in front of me and think, how am I going to get out of this? That was all that was on my mind. Taking a picture is ridiculous.
Yeah, I talked to a guy who was a bird watcher, and he says that even watching doing that, even though there's millions of photos of birds, he's like you don't
Mhm.
always get that that good picture. You can be out there all day long and not get a picture of the birds.
Oh yeah,
And
I've done it with bear and other animals too.
right,
It's
yeah,
and especially even talking about like, okay, this is what we want to do,
right,
having the camera in my hand and still didn't do it.
right. And that's just the same thing. Even like fishermen, they go out looking for a certain type of fish. They got the bait and everything, and they
Hmm.
could be out there all day long and not catch anything.
Yeah, there's never any guarantees.
Right? And so I just think that's kind of I don't know, kind of a closed mind, I guess maybe, but you know,
But then, you know, there have been people that have gotten pictures, and I've got a couple.
right,
Um, and usually the legitimate pictures, people want nothing to do with it. They
right.
don't go out and put it on Facebook. They don't put it on YouTube. They don't go out and tell people they've even got the picture. Usually they hide it away. And I think it's because it's such a traumatic experience. Oh, that's interesting. Tree breaks and sounds.
Mentally challenged.
It's well, I'm not sure about mentally challenged. Um, maybe it's just a little more aggression than the others. So its behavior is different. Would be my
Right.
guess. I mean, it's possible they got mental problems. Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen it in dogs, so
Oh yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, who knows what goes on? Bad genetics or something, or
Yeah,
but
or
that's
maybe inbreeding or disease or
yeah,
there's any number of things.
yeah, yeah, Temple, Texas. Yeah, so we've been going out to that area and then to another area, and we've got some pretty good stuff, man. We've actually heard some heavy breathing. Me and Walter, we heard some heavy breathing, like. I mean, we were like 300 feet away, and we were like, man, are we really hearing that? So when me and Walter went to that area, uh, we were back there, and Walter's like, hey, hey, you know, and his friend who stayed back at camp goes, man, I heard you guys back there. So we're like, okay, good. At least we know that the sound does travel that far.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good. And what was funny is that we actually went out there the other day, and about 3 weeks ago, and it was raining, and I had left my trail cam way back in the woods, and I was like, dude, I'm not leaving my trail cam back there. It's a nice
Mhm.
trail cam. We got to go back there and get it, and it was so muddy. I mean, our shoes were almost coming off in the mud.
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah. It was a short trip, but it's always fun to get out there and fool around with Walter. He's so fun to be with.
I was
But
talking to an old buddy of mine. In fact, we recorded him and Milo for the last week's show we did last weekend, and Scott and I were reminiscing about. It must have been, sometime after we got out of the military, that he and I decided, for whatever reason, we were going to hike way back into this watershed at night, and it was just raining like heck.
Right.
So we hiked, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles back in there with a couple of flashlights, and I had my 12 gauge, and I took a couple of road flares. It's the only way we could start a fire. We got this
Oh
fire
wow.
going, and of course we weren't going to camp out there. I don't know what we were going to go out and look around, I guess, and see if we could hear or see anything Bigfoot wise. And it was nothing was going on, and there was no more dry wood. So we ended up taking the 12 gauge and shooting the fire, taking turns shooting the fire to put it out.
Oh, that's funny.
But it's funny, some of the things you do. You go to a place and you think you're going to do something, and then you go way back, and then you decide, oh shoot, this is a bust. So there's a whole night shot.
I gotta convince this big dog. He always says that when he comes on. That's Lucas' cousin, Felipe. Um, yeah, man, we had trouble starting our fire too. I never thought about taking road flares. That's a good idea.
It works pretty good, actually.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We uh, we finally got it going really, really good that night, but then it started raining, so I was like, man, we just don't. I mean, it's no fun when you're out there raining, and I mean, it's one thing if you like actually like travel like a few hours to a destination,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and then you're out there, so you're just out there. But I live an hour away from San Houston, so it's like no big deal. I can come back anytime.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's worth taking a look sometimes, though, because you never know.
right. Yeah, and I like it. I actually do like going after the rain because that's when it's easier to find tracks a lot of times.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, especially there in the San Houston because it's so much leaf litter on the ground. But if you go by the creeks, all that stuff has got wiped out. That's when
Hmm.
you find the good tracks. That's what I
Yeah,
like about it.
exactly. The thing for them, when it's raining, it's quieter for them to move and hunt,
Right.
because the ground is softer. And
Yeah, we've been out there a couple of times when uh, we can hear movement, whether or not it's a squatch or not, but we can hear the movement, and it sounds like I thought it was just like on 2 feet,
oh
and
yeah, yeah.
and so we always you can never see them, but we always wonder if that's what it is. But I don't think it's a person out there walking around, and we're out there at camp all by ourselves most of the time.
I wouldn't think so. Yeah, just be sure you got the slow guy with you. That's slower than everybody else.
Yeah, that's Walter. Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely trip him. So, so have you heard any good encounters that you haven't posted for any particular reason?
I'm There have been quite a few, actually. Of course, let's see. I don't know if I think I told you about going to New Mexico, and I saw TW back
Okay.
in April, and we were there for 2 weeks. And uh, when I got a hold of him, he said, "Hey, you're coming down just the right time, because there had been a sighting just the week before I got there." And one of his friends in the local police department told him about some kids were out partying, I guess, and he and I went out there, and sure enough, we did find some rock stacks and some other signs, some the broken brush and stuff there. So that was interesting. And then, of course, our trip to Oregon and stuff we found there. And then uh, I've got a contact. Yes, the underwear changing moment. We I've got a friend in Alaska, native, and he was telling me some stuff. He's doing some investigative work up there, but there's some crazy stuff going on. Um, Not crazy in the sense of, it's just a lot of off the wall stuff,
Right.
uh, where these things are actually coming challenging villages. They're having standoffs with the native folks there. And I've been trying to work with him and help him to give them information, that'll help them to kind of keep these things at bay. But um, it's they're never good situations. Psychological resistance, that's a good one. I think a lot of people, they just it's too incredulous for them to believe. And I think a lot of it goes to the fact that we think that we are, hey, Lupe, these, a lot of people, they think that, and we're raised that way, that we're kind of the top of the food chain and, we're, the top of everything. And I think that's sort of ingrained in us mentally. And this represents something that's kind of higher on the food chain than we are. And I kind of think that's the core of why it's hard for people to accept.
Yeah,
But then you go back to stories about gorillas before they were officially recognized, and were very similar to the kinds of stories.
that experience not too long ago. I heard a scream or deep moan so loud it shook my insides and running through the trees. Sounded like a sledgehammer hitting the ground, and then it stopped. Have
Yep,
either of you
absolutely.
experienced that?
Right after, back in '75, right after Green and Hendon left, the camp, went back to Canada. My buddy John and I and his younger brother went out to the location. They wanted to see where, the stuff was, where they had camped, and where the Philip Screamer stuff was going on. And we tell the story because it's funny, but that was a component of it, because the three of us walked out along, it was a gas pipeline road with timber on both sides, and it was about 100 feet apart, the tree line, and all field grass. So we went out there, and it was night when we got there, and we decided to kind of walk down one of the tree lines, and with our lights off, and periodically one of us would shine a light, to the other tree line or ahead, and then we turn it off, because we were just kind of watching and listening. And at one point, I shined my light, and I saw eye shine, and I turned it off, and I said, John, I see eye shine over here. I said, so let's both shine our lights over there and see if we can get a better look. So we did that, and there was nothing. It was gone this time. And then we turned our lights off, and all of a sudden there was just crashing through the timber, boom, 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 as it and it was incredible how fast it ran. And what really spooked us is when it stopped, and we thought, oh crap, it's going to come back after us. So I told the guys, I said, we need to go back to the car in a very orderly fashion. Don't run, don't get excited. We took 3 steps and broke into sheer panic and ran back.
That's pretty good. I like that. That's pretty good.
So Merry Christmas, buddy.
And this is Walter.
Oh, would love to see your site.
Yeah, but yeah, man. I've yet to hear the running. I know Walter's heard it. When they've got bluff charged twice. At an area that I told him to go to that wasn't very aggressive, and then he goes out there and gets an aggressive encounter.
We got to hear one run on blacktop one time at night.
Oh yeah.
And this is back when we were doing for those who, know my stuff, the Yakult thing in Southern Washington back in 1989. And it was, there was a group of us with the family there, and some of the family members and me and a couple of my people went around the house one way, and then the rest went around the other way. And I think we were just kind of listening, because things happen there all the time. And they had a German Shepherd. Well, the German Shepherd was with us, and it was acting really weird. It was just kind of staying low to the ground, and it was very cautious in its movements. So we get up to where the fence was. We were in the mowed yard, and there was a fence, and beyond the fence was field grass and trees and things. So we didn't have lights on. That was kind of the rule. We just left the lights off, and we listened to things that happened. And as we neared the fence line, something went crashing through the brush at the edge of the road, and went away. And it sounded just like bare skin slapping, running down there. You could hear those big flat feet slapping on the pavement for a long ways. That was the darndest thing I've ever heard. But
Yeah, my cousins that live up near Austin. It's out in the hill country. They've got land out there, and he said they would come out in the middle of the night when they would finally get there, like on a Friday night, and they would hear it running, because it's hard rocky ground, and they actually had like this big like a creek, but it had a very steep drop, maybe like 15 feet. They could hear it go boom, 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 or they would jump down.
Yeah. We heard him run down through the pastures at that same location one night, and it sounded like a bunch of horses running. And then we
Oh,
found
man.
the next day where a lot of the field grass and big, 10, 15 feet across areas where the grass had all been mashed down. And Lupe, how you doing, buddy?
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we
We
can
can
hear
hear
you.
you.
I'm at church, man. I came out here real quick. I just want to say, Will, Merry Christmas to you and your family, man. And it's been a long time, buddy.
Same to you, buddy. How you doing?
Hey, I do have one question to ask you, man, if I can.
Sure. Ask away.
And that's if humans are the only creatures to have a chin, what does Bigfoot have? Does it have a chin or doesn't it?
From
And
what
so if it had a chin, would it make it human?
Well, I don't think a chin makes it human, but they have a heavy jaw, so they probably have something that's similar to what we have, this structure. But then, gorillas do too.
Hmm.
It's just that primate jaw.
And someone asked, "Did you ever go armed? You go armed, Will?"
We did last time. You bet we did.
Who doesn't go armed? Come on, man. I take a little pea shooter or something, right, Joe?
Yeah, you got a badass Miss Piggy over there.
I'm fortunate. My guy, one of my security guy on the team, is an ex-ranger and terrorist hunter. So
Yeah.
he takes
Oh,
care
wow.
of us.
Yeah,
He takes care
okay.
of us. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, always got to have somebody watching your back when you're out there, man. I tell you.
Yeah, because you're focused on what's going on, and you need somebody watching your back.
That's why we take Loopy.
Good man for the job.
Yes, sir. Yeah, but I got to run, guys. I just want to tell you, Merry Christmas. I got to get back in the building. We're having our annual Christmas party, so.
Well, it's good to see you and hear from you, man.
Good talking to you, Will, and God bless. And all right, y'all take care.
All right,
buddy. You too.
Now, if I know how to get me out of here, Joe.
I got you. Get out of here. Cool, man. Loop is a character, man. He's one of those guys, man. When you go out in the woods with him, and he's like a perfect example. When people say these things disappear, Loopy will disappear on you. I mean, he will. You'll look up, you'll see him 1 second, and then 2 seconds later, he's gone. Yeah, we're like, where in the hell did Loopy go?
The security guy was telling me about. He and I were doing that with the rest of the guys in Oregon in September. That's my old. I kind of revert back to my. Well, before I was in the Army, I was a scout in the Army, so my job was to not be seen and to observe. Right. So I just kind of go into that mode, and a lot of times, even as an old guy, I can still be pretty quiet and move without being seen. So, and I don't want to end up as a sack lunch either. So,
Yeah. I hear you on that. Yeah, I mean, when I'm out there, I keep my head on the swivel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as quiet as probably most people are. But
I can't caution people enough about that. Never go alone, and keep your eyes up. Always, like you said, keep your head on the swivel. Watch what's going around you. Listen to things. Watch for subtle signs.
Right. And that's one thing I try to tell people too. Just because you hear a noise to your right doesn't mean you should be looking to your left either.
Oh yeah, because if these things are doing stuff, they're going to surround you. And don't ever think they're alone.
You still got about another 30 minutes, so you're good. Someone said always look up and back.
Yes, yeah, always look all around you.
And that's one thing. That's one thing that I do when I go out, is I look up at the trees.
Mm-hmm. Well, we get a lot of stories of juveniles in trees.
Right.
So, and it should be expected. In fact, we had a gal that was an anthropologist on my show here this past week. And in fact, I'm going to have 2 anthropologists on this coming week. And one is John, our forensic anthropologist, and the other one is Forrest. So that'll be very interesting. But she mentioned, about their feet and being largely arboreal. So, I'm sure the young ones spend a good deal of time in trees.
Yeah, sometimes I take off and I leave for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I'll come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm never too far. I'm trying not to leave anyone too far behind, or you know, just for my safety and their safety. But
Yeah,
you know,
you definitely got to keep
sometimes
each other.
curiosity gets the best of you, though. You know, you're like, I see something that looks like it's a good area. I gotta go check it out. You know,
Hmm.
so it's always it's an adrenaline rush at the same time, even if you are kind
Yeah,
of scared. And
my team,
you
I
know,
try to make sure that we keep an eye on each other and not to get out of sight. The biggest problem we've had is, if we're in multiple vehicles going from one area to the next, and and I've got a bad habit of wanting to stop and look at things because I spot things that I'm familiar with, and the other guys, they would take off and lose sight of us. So we have to coordinate that better and kind of get used to, if keep an eye on the other vehicle. If you see it stop, then you need to stop and keep everybody in sight.
right? Yeah. And I was going to ask you when you're talking about finding prints, have you ever found knuckle prints?
Found what kind of prints?
Knuckle prints?
Knuckle runs. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did.
Okay.
And we've got a site in Arizona right now where our guy there is he finds, and I think I've showed you some of those tracks. Finds hundreds and hundreds of tracks. I don't think we've even got um, an actual head count yet because he's found tracks everywhere from 3 inches up to 20 inches in this area.
Right. That's Walter again. I told you about the last time we left recorders. We got yelled at or grunted at. Yeah, we were actually picking up our recorders, and
Hmm.
as a matter of fact, going into it into the area that we call Alpha, we were going into that area, and I told Walter, I said, "Dude, I got a weird feeling." I said, "I got a weird feeling," and I said, let's get the cameras and our recorders, and let's get the hell out." And we actually came back to the truck, and we just waited there, and we heard this roar, just this real grumbly kind of,
Oh,
yeah. And
it's funny when you leave recorders out. Sometimes Tom had this happen not long ago in the area we went to in September. He left recorders out, and not 5 minutes after he left the area, and I guess he had a timer on it or something, so he knew exactly when this happened. But there were also some grunts and bipedal walking around. So I guess one of the creatures came and checked out the recorder. Didn't bother it, but it came and had a look anyway.
mm,
It sounds very similar to what happened to you.
yeah, yeah, it was pretty creepy. It was pretty creepy. But
It's I think oftentimes if we're out there doing stuff, we may not see them, but they're certainly watching us.
right, that's one thing I tell people all the time. I bet they see us a lot more than we see them.
Oh, tremendous
And
amount more.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you can bet on it.
Yeah. I don't know who this is. What are your thoughts on night vision and FLIR equipment?
Um, that stuff's kind of spendy. And even the cheaper ones, and I say cheaper ones, 3, 4, $5,000, um, they're okay. The problem with some of that stuff, unless you're, talking an insane amount of money, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you can spend up to $500,000 on something like that, and probably more, I suppose. But the lower level ones, the problem is they don't penetrate brush. So
Yeah.
if you have relatively open area, you might be okay. But if you're in a heavily wooded area, let's say, Western Washington or Oregon, places like that, your visibility is going to be really, really limited. But
Yeah.
now, if you're in a more open area, then you might be good to go.
Right. That's one thing about the San Mesa forest. It's so thick sometimes. Well, I mean, you can't see 5 feet.
Yeah, I
You
can
know.
believe that.
Yeah. I mean, you could put a T-Rex back there. No one would ever see it.
So
You
one
know.
thing I kind of like about Northern California and Southern Oregon is it's in a lot of the areas it's kind of open. You get a lot of pine, but there's not a lot of underbrush, so you can get some good visibility. But um, other areas it's really thick too, so it just depends.
You know, one thing I always talk about is how like when I go places and I'll meet people and I talk about this stuff, and all of a sudden I get these stories from other people. Have you ever gotten that where you like are you open?
I had to force myself to be years ago
Okay.
when I was living in Southern Washington, Skamania County area. I used to go to the field with a friend from Portland, and he was involved in something completely different, but he'd had his own Bigfoot experience.
Mm.
So he contacted me through a newspaper article, and so we would go. I'd get reports, and we'd go investigate the reports. And one time, and usually our mode of operation was on the way to wherever we were going, we'd stop and have breakfast. That was kind of the ritual. So whenever we stopped, I thought we talked one time. And he says, I'll bet you look around this room of people, there are probably, half a dozen people in here that have had sightings. So finally, I just thought, you know what? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I would get up and I'd go pick a random table, and I'd always look serious. And I'd say, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Have you, or do you know someone that's seen one of these creatures? And I never had anybody ridicule me, never had anybody laugh.
Right.
It was either we haven't, but if we do, could you have a card? Or they would have a sighting, or they knew somebody that did. And it was always very positive. So by doing that, I finally got to the point where I didn't care anymore. And I just, I'd walk up to strange people and say, pardon me, but have you seen a Bigfoot before?
Yeah.
It's all in your approach. It's all in your approach.
Yeah. I found that too, that if you kind of talk about it, and just don't start coming out too strong, people will open up. And especially with me, like my family, I can't believe how many family members have come to me and told me, hey, you know what, those things are real. I've seen them.
I got raked over the coals when I was 14. I've got 5 sisters, so my sisters and parents kind of raked me over the coals. I mean, all we were doing was saying, "Hey, we found these big footprints,"
Right.
And John's dad said it was this hairy monster out in the woods, and they laughed us out of the house. And see, that was 1972. So fast forward to 1981. One of my younger sisters, who was the main ridiculer, had her own sighting.
Yeah.
And it took her years and years to tell me about it, because I'm sure she thought I was going to, get her good for that. But I went to her house for, I don't know, it was one of the holidays, back in the 90s. And my brother-in-law went out of the room for something. And she says, I got to tell you something before he comes back. And I'm thinking, okay, tell away. And she tells me the story. She, he'd gone out with some friends, kind of a bachelor thing. And she went over to one of our other sisters' house to, visit for the evening. And I think she was going to spend the night and didn't, changed her mind. So she was heading back to their house, which was the place we grew up was kind of in between where our sister lived and where she lived. So she had to drive through the area we grew up in. And there was this intersection. There wasn't much in that area. There was one intersection. There was an old house that was used as a local store, and that was all that was there. And there was a street light there. So as she approached the street light, this creature was right on the side of the road, right by the car. She drove right by it within a couple of feet. And apparently the thing was kind of jumping up and down like it was really agitated. Maybe at the presence of the car, I suppose. And it really freaked her out. So it was at least a decade, probably more, before she actually told me this. And to this day, she won't talk about it. She won't write the story down. She won't do anything. So it just totally freaked her out. But, be careful who you make fun of.
Right. Yeah. It'll come back and get you in the butt.
Right.
But at least it wasn't like a terrifying encounter. So that's a good thing,
It was, well, for her, it was terrifying enough, I think,
Yeah.
It's like most people, like we mentioned earlier, who don't want to really accept the subject, or the possibility that something like this exists. She was in that realm. And, when it's right there in front of you, and most people will still shut down, and they simply don't want to accept it. And that's where she's at. And I think a lot of people, for every one person that will talk about an experience, there's probably 20 more like her, that bottle it up and simply won't talk about it.
Yeah, like that. But I guess it's close to 2 years now that I talked to the one hunter out in San Luis Forest, and he told me, because I'm gonna tell you this one time, and then that's it. I'll never talk about it. I tried to get him to come on the show, but he told me one time, and that was it. And I emailed him and texted him, and he never returned my calls. And He's the one that was walking down the Lone Star Trail. It's right there by a campground that everyone goes to. And when he got to this, it's like a big creek, and there was a bridge there, but it got washed out here recently.
Mm-hmm.
When he got to that little clearing where that bridge is at, and he heard it walking with him, along the pacing him. When he got to that little clearing, it stepped out. He said, "Shit," he turned back around and left. That's probably about a mile and a half walk at least. I imagine that was a long mile and a half walk back.
Oh, can you imagine? I mean, you know what's there, and just hoping to God it's not following you out.
Yeah, and he said when he saw it, he said it wasn't happy. He said he just said it wasn't happy to see him. That it was. He thinks it was pacing them, with a purpose to, either get them out or to do some harm to them. But
oh yeah, right.
but that one wasn't very big. He said it was maybe like 6.5 feet, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I talked to him, and that was the only time I really talked to him. And he told me the story, but it scared him enough to where he said, "I'll never go hunting again."
Oh yeah, no, I've heard that from people before too, where people just won't. I tell you, I know from my own experience. I don't enjoy the outdoors like I did prior to that first encounter. I just don't. I mean, I'll go out with a group of friends camping or something, but what we've done is we used to do a lot of wild camps, just pick our own spots. Right. And after all that, it's like, now let's go to the campground. And in the later years, maybe it's age, I don't know. Now we just rent a cabin, and
I think it's age because I'm getting there too myself, man.
Yeah, I know. It's like, well, just don't feel like taking all the stuff out anymore. But even going to the field, it's like, the team I have, there's 5 of us, and we stuck pretty close together, and it's just, like you said, that head on the swivel thing. It's just a feeling of not knowing you're not always safe out there. And years ago, I'd take off cross country hunting by myself and not think twice about it.
Does that? How often does that pop into your head? Your encounter.
A lot.
Really?
Every that's been, geez, I was 16, so that's 40, probably 45, 46 years ago, something like that, and periodically I still have nightmares from it.
Really?
Yeah.
This is Dr. Lester. It's interesting because when you give consideration to what Bigfoot seems or appears to be, it fits well into the new emerging information coming out of the fossils.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, and it's interesting, we have a friend in Montana who's a judge, and we've had him on our show a number of times.
Right.
And he and I were talking one time, and he says, if you go look at the federal rules of evidence, and everybody's, because you always hear the question or the statement that, well, if they exist, there's no evidence. How come there's no evidence? Well, and they always want to dismiss people's stories as just anecdotal stories. Well, you could say they're anecdotal stories, but if you were to take that into a court of law, it's testimony. Right. So witness testimony is evidence. And oftentimes, if you watch, we watch a lot of these, the ID channel shows, murder and stuff. And it's interesting how often nothing more than testimony convicts people. And so when people say that's not evidence, that's wrong. It is evidence. And of course, we have, footprints and handprints and territorial markings. We have scat. There's audio screams, all kinds of stuff. There's plenty of evidence. It's more of a matter of what people are willing to accept than it is a matter of there being evidence.
I walked a tiny portion of the Lone Star at night by myself a few weeks back. Definitely not for the faint of heart. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Lone Star has got some areas. Well, there's a lot of areas in the Lone Star that's really kind of spooky, even in the daytime. And so
really?
At nighttime, yeah. Yeah, man. Well, I'd love to get you down here. I bet Lupe would love to get you down here too, man.
I would love to come and see it. Yeah.
Yeah. See this Walter again. When researching these creatures, do you think it's best to stay in one place or go recon the whole area?
It really depends. I mean, you kind of got to do your homework on an area to know what's going on. And the creatures move. Every couple of weeks they'll move. They rotate their feeding areas. And the main reason is because the game animals are going to, once they're onto their presence, they're going to move anyway. So it works in their benefit if they move, and it's typically about 2 weeks. So once you kind of have an idea of what's going on in a place, watch the game animals. If you go where the game animals are, that's kind of your best bet. But don't get in the way of a hunt.
Yeah, my friend Armando. I wish these guys would have met Armando. He passed away here, and I mentioned his name before. He passed away here earlier this summer. He got COVID. Man, he's such a great guy.
Oh no.
And I'm sure you remember me mentioning his name before.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, man. And he was big on recon and reconning the area. Man. He would break out with the topo maps, and man, he would line everything out. This is where we're going. This, he was really good at that.
In the past, I've spent probably the majority of my time doing nothing but reconning areas.
Right.
And so I mean, you're going to spend a lot of time doing that. That's the downside, and a lot of people aren't up for that because, you can. Believe me, I know I've spent Lord knows how many thousands of hours over the years, not really having much to show for it except learning those areas and seeing what's out there and seeing where the animals are and just learning the terrain. That's a choice. It's a good thing to do, but you're going to spend a lot of time doing it with very little reward for it.
Yeah, you're right about that. But sometimes going out there and just camping, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and you meet some great people. I've met some of the best people in my entire life with this subject as the medium. In walks of life where how it is in walks of life, you meet people in different walks of life that you would never have a reason to talk to that person otherwise.
Right. And of all different backgrounds,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I would never met Lupe if it wasn't for this,
Yeah, me neither.
Meeting Abe is on here. Abe was on your show. I don't know if you saw Abe.
Yeah.
Abe was on your show. Yeah. Again, like Armando, man, Big Dog, just met so many people just within the Bigfoot world. And, these guys are gonna be my lifelong friends, And,
yeah, absolutely.
Mark too. I don't think I've ever met Mark, or maybe I did. I don't remember. I met so many guys at the San Houston Big Creek. Yeah. Mark, we need to get Will down here. We need to start a petition or GoFundMe or something to get Will down here. There's so many guys here in Texas, man, that that really like you and appreciate what you do. And,
I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that.
A lot of the guys, man, it's they like your no nonsense approach, and I think that's what a lot of people like about you. And that's certainly what I like about you.
Just the way I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I wasn't like a lot of people that get into this. They get into it for, I've seen untold reasons that people. I'll give you an example. There was a guy in Vancouver I knew back in the late, it was early 90s, and he's just somebody that hung out in his basement, didn't work. His wife worked, and nice enough guy and everything. But we were talking one time, and I'd mentioned that I knew, Renee Hinden and John Green and those guys. I told him the story about, when I met those guys. And I used to have a lot of my stuff got destroyed in a basement flood in the mid 90s in Vancouver. And unfortunately, the water just trashed everything. And I had a binder, a 4-inch binder that was full of letters just from Renee Hinden, because he and I wrote prolifically back and forth. So I let this guy look at, I think, you can look at him, see what kind of a guy Renee is, and Renee wrote and stuff, the way he talked, you see the few videos, that's the way he was. So he got just enamored with this stuff. And Renee used to come and visit me. He would make a trip through Vancouver from Northern California. He made his one trip annually to Bluff Creek. He'd spend a couple weeks down there, then he'd go back to British Columbia. And usually he'd call me ahead of time and he'd stop and stay for a few days, and then periodically I'd drive up to his house in Richmond. So on this one trip, I told this guy, I said, hey, Renee's coming down for a visit if you'd like to meet him. And so the guy, he just kind of wigged out. It's messed him up mentally, where he went out and he decided that was going to be his life. He was going to be, this big shot Bigfoot hunter from his basement. And I mean, for me, I ran into the creatures. I didn't ask for that, but it posed a lot of questions to me, because I grew up fishing and hunting and I love to be in the outdoors.
Right.
And that really threw a wrench in my thinking. So for me, it was a pursuit to find out, I wanted to dig down to the bottom of the question and find out what these things were and how many there were and what they were doing and the whole 9 yards. And the more answers I got, the more questions came up. So here I am 49 years later. But people like that, I've seen this so many times. They come into it for, because either they thought they were going to get rich and famous or whatever. It's not the reason to get into this, because you're not going to get those things.
Right.
It's not what the subject's about. You're in it to learn something.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think.
Right. No, and I agree with you on that. I try to learn as much as I can and try to talk to as many people. When I talk to witnesses, I don't just talk to them. Give me your story. I want to learn what exactly you experienced and what happened with that. Whether it was just something crossing the street or if it was an aggressive encounter.
What's always got my fascination was behaviors.
Yeah.
And an example of that was, I mentioned the Knuckle thing. That's one of my favorite ones, because it was a 9-month. It was very unusual, because typically these things will move out of the area, 14, 15 days, they're gone. This group stayed there for 9 months. No idea to this day why they were there. I mean, they were obviously getting their needs met, but there was a lot of ranches and farms and things in the area, so I'm sure there was plenty of food around. But when I went out there, I learned about it. I sat down on the front porch. It was on the 7th of June of 1989. I went out a nice June morning in Vancouver, and I sat on the front steps. I had the newspaper, and I didn't unfold it. I'm looking at the headlines, and I flipped the paper over, and here's an article on the front page about a Bigfoot sighting that happened just a couple days before. And they gave the people's address, which I thought was a bad move, for the family. They should never put their home address in the paper.
Right.
And I thought, God, there's going to be a million people go out there. But I thought, I'm going to drive out and talk to them anyway. So sure enough, I drive out, and the people were nice. They were city people from Wisconsin, had never lived in the country. They decided to make the move to Washington, and they bought 13 acres, and bought a horse, and were trying out country life. And they were sitting around. The 16-year-old son and the mom were sitting here. I think she was going to go out and ride the horse. So the horse was making a ruckus, and she asked him to go out and check on the horse, because she just had it tied with a rope to the corral, because she was only going to be out there shortly. And she says, well, go out and check on the horse, make sure the rope isn't getting, wrapped up in its hooves. So he goes out there and he sees what he thinks is a person and walking along this tree line next to the field. So he goes running out there, and if he'd thought about it, there's no houses were anywhere near. You had to go 20 acres to get to the next house. So there was nothing nearby. So there wouldn't have been any access from that direction. There was no roads, nothing down there. And he runs after what he thinks is this person. He gets about 50 to 100 feet away from it, and he slips on a tree branch that was buried in the field grass, and he makes a bunch of noise. So the thing hears him, and it turns around, and he said it kind of got a surprised look on its face. Its head went back, its eyes got big, then it kind of leaned forward like it was trying to get a better look at him. Then he said it put its hands out, arms out at 45-degree angles, palms facing, and come walking towards him. Well, he gets up and he runs to the house, and he had to change his boots, because he said the boots he was wearing is what caused him to slip on the branch. So he did that hurry. Then he went running back out, and in the meantime, the creature had resumed its course back down the direction it was going. He runs after it again. This time it hears him and it turns around and comes. It charged him. So he run back, and I didn't try to catch him. It just charged him. He was able to climb up on a small outbuilding, and the thing stood there for some time and watched him, almost to make sure he wasn't going to leave again and come after him. So this time, once again, the creature turned around and resumed its same course. And I was correct about the number of people coming out. All these people came out there to question. They wanted the story. They wanted to find tracks, scat, hair, and that was it. Then they left. I said, well, the first thing that popped in my mind, I thought, well, now that's really unusual behavior. It wasn't trying to catch him. It was trying to hurt him. And it kept going in the same direction each time. And I said, well, did anybody want to go down there in the direction the creature went? He said, no, nobody's interested. Is it okay if I go down there? Sure, we'll take you down. So we go down. It was, a couple acres, little creek. We crossed the creek, went up into the next pasture, and there was a big cottonwood tree that was down. And it was probably 3-4 feet through at the base. Big tree, big root wad. And where it was apparently had grown next to an intermittent pond. And it was dry this time of year. So under the base of the tree, there was, probably 5-6 foot opening. And in the dirt, there were 2 sets of juvenile tracks all over in this dirt, 9 inches and 12 inches. And I said, there's the reason it was trying to keep you from coming down here. And just escalate. I mean, to me, I always got to figure out what's going on. I listen to what happened. I don't care about the footprints. I don't care about the other stuff. I mean, that's interesting stuff. Sure, it gives you good information about the creatures. But to me, what they were doing has always been more important because that gives you more information.
Yeah, very, very true. This is Dr. Lester again, and I'm still waiting on that $500,000 research grant. Will, how long have you been waiting for that?
Oh, boy. I can tell you stories.
Yeah. So, Will, where can people find you?
I either at my website, williamjevning.com, or you can look at creekdevil.com, or you can contact me directly if you like, and it's just my name, williamjevning@yahoo.com, or wjevning@gmail.com.
Cool. What advice would you give people who want to start researching Bigfoot? Who have probably never done it before, but they're just like, you know what? I want to go look for this thing myself and see what I can find.
I wrote a book called Bigfoot Fieldwork 101. Not that I'm interested in selling books, hint, hint, but
Of course.
I did that for people, who are interested in getting us started. And it gives you some, there's some basic equipment. And I tell people don't go out and spend a whole bunch of money because you don't need a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
There's some basic things you can get that are fairly inexpensive that I list in the book. There's some techniques of things to do, and that includes, of course, map reading, how to conduct searches of areas, evidence collection, things like that, and casting footprints. And this is kind of, that's why it's called Bigfoot Fieldwork 101. It's for beginners, people just starting out. And for other people, if maybe there's things that they've done, but maybe aren't as familiar with, like some of the search techniques and things like search patterns, things like that. And then research an area. If you got an area that's suspected or an area that you have an interest in, go to the libraries, dig up any articles, and it's not always called Bigfoot, the articles. You sort of have to do your homework on what people might have been calling something, because the term Bigfoot's only been around since about 1958. So, every local area has its own name for these things. So you really have to know that and do the search, see what's been going on in that area, and that'll kind of give you a good place to look, or to start looking anyway.
And I would add, if you're going to go out with a team, do your research on that team too.
Right. Yeah. Don't go alone, because you don't want to be a happy meal.
Man, I've gone alone one time, Will, and I got turned around before.
Oh, yeah.
I got turned around. You know what was funny? Me and Walter got turned around that night. We went to go. We went out there. It was so muddy. We're trying to find my trail cam, and we turned around like it was pitch black. It was
Oh
late at
no.
night, and we were like, "Which fucking way did we come in here?" And we're like looking around, and man, I pulled out my phone and I got my Google Maps, and I found this
Mhm.
particular pond that I was near, and said, "Oh, we're going this way."
Oh
But
man.
it was yeah, it
And
was funny. But
don't try to rely on new book. I actually have I'm going to have two books. One is called Bigfoot Questions and Answers, and the other one is going to be a Creek Devil book, and that's sort of the kind of a best of, with the interviews from some of the best interviews we had on the show. So it's I thought it was kind of a nice project because you can, if if you hear the show and like the show and listen to these people, you can actually have the written transcript of those interviews. So
and you know what I'm going to add to my little gear, to all my gear, is some reflectors that I can stick on the trees at
oh,
nighttime.
good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking about that last night. I said, man, they have those little round ones you can like actually pin onto a tree. I said,
I
I'm
was
gonna
going
use
to tell
that.
you, people listening, don't rely on your phones, um, for GPS and everything,
Right.
because, and I'll give you a good example. A place we went to in Oregon, even near the resorts where we stayed, there was no phone service. There was nothing out there.
Right.
There was no signal. So, I always, I do things the old-fashioned way. I like topographic maps,
Right.
um, and you want to research where you're going ahead of time, so you're kind of familiar with the ground before you go in there, because like it's easy, like you said, it's easy to get turned around.
Right.
I got turned around one time years ago. We weren't Bigfoot hunting. I was out picking chanterelle mushrooms. I was going to make some spaghetti and wanted some fresh mushrooms. So a buddy of mine and I went up in the hills, and I was paying more attention to the ground where the patches of mushrooms were, and I got turned around. So
Yeah.
he sat down and was starting to cry, was going to die, and I said, "I'm hungry. I got food in the car, so I'm going to the car." And I found a little stream and went down the stream and
Okay. Yeah.
hit a road, and I had a long walk back, but I had lunch when I got to the car.
Let's take this last question. How many types of these species, subspecies, what parts are they found in North America?
I was told through my contact, and I won't mention who he is, that there were 4 types, 2 species groups, and he said there could be a 5th type, but out of the 4 types, there are 22 variations. So,
Wow.
yeah, see, I mean, and that's, you get areas where, you get a breeding population and it doesn't, the gene pool doesn't mix into another gene pool. So some of
Right.
these, things develop in one group, and just like, groups of humans, where you get some differences. Because the gene pool is not being mixed, they're separated by geographical boundaries, things like that. So that's what accounts for the variations. But two main species groupings with 2 types in each one.
Right. Well, cool beans, Mr. Will. I want to thank you for doing the show one more time, and I
Absolutely,
appreciate it.
anytime.
Yeah, man. And everyone in the chat room, I appreciate the participation very much. And if you guys have any questions, man, find Will. You can find him through me. You can find him on his Facebook group, which is is it JRG or is it Jevning Research Group? I don't remember. It's a
Yeah,
JRG.
I think it's Jevning Research Group, JRG.
Yeah,
And it's growing. There's always new people coming on there,
yeah.
so we're glad to
And
see
it's
that.
what I like about it is very, very, very little drama. We do a good
Yeah,
job of putting a
yeah.
stop to that pretty quick.
There's not a lot of the nonsense you see in other groups, which I'm really
Yeah,
pleased to see that.
yeah, yeah. And I do my best to keep that under wraps too, Will.
You do a great job, Joe. And Joe runs the Jevning Research Group nationally, so he is the man to contact.
Cool, man. Well, Will, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for everything that that you've done for me, man. You're always a good guy for me to reach out to and just talk to and just get some advice from. So I really appreciate all that too. And you really, man, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be even doing this show. I wouldn't be doing Bigfoot research. I wouldn't be doing this show. So thanks a lot for everything. I really do appreciate it, man.
I certainly appreciate your friendship, Joe.
Well, cool beans, everyone. Y'all have a good night, and we will talk to you later.